I wanted to take a moment and talk about a subject that I've been doing a lot of research on here recently, and that is the subject of death. It is something that human beings choose not to talk about on a very regular basis, and most people have a significant amount of fear related to the subject of death. What I've discovered over the research that I've done in preparation for a meeting that we're having at my workplace is that really death is not what we're afraid of. Death is a moment. And if you imagine your life as a line where you start at the beginning and you complete, death is the demarcation point at the end of that line. It is not an event per se. There's no time that's associated with death. It is simply recording a moment where the physical body stops functioning and turns back into the food or the matter that it was originally created from. So in our mother's wombs, we are assembled through the food and the metabolized cellular process that occurs. And when we die, that process stops and our bodies become either decayed matter or food for the various organisms that might choose to consume us. This follows on to the premise that life lives on life. Life is not a wonderfully pretty thing. Life exists through the process of killing other living things and eating them. No matter what persuasion you are, vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, omnivore, you live through the process of killing living things and consuming them. And our bodies, through heat and metabolism, manufacture what we need, the energies, for our lives. And when we die, our bodies go into that same process. What I've discovered is we fear something that precedes death. It's the prelude to death. That is the pain and the suffering that might be personally involved for us in terms of illness and other types of pre-death syndromes that might exist. We fear the loss of our families and our friends, and conversely, we fear what pain they are going to experience when we go away, their loss. We also fear the unknown. Human beings have an innate and instinctual fear of what is not understood. And Jordan Peterson speaks very clearly about this in his work, where our limbic systems are programmed to avoid the chaos, the unknown. And when something is truly unknown, that is something like death, where we cannot experience it, it's not possible, that generates cortisol and the fear elements that our bodies create, sending us into a primal state of fear. So it isn't something that we can just rationally dismiss. We can control it through our prefrontal cortex activity. We can tell our limbic system to calm down, but we will never lose the fear of that unknown. And that is how humans have evolved and gotten to the forms we are today. We have these protections that have been built in. So, at the end of the day, death is something that is going to happen to us. It will happen to everyone, and is more reliable than even taxes. What then do we do as human beings to be okay with that, to understand that fact, and to say, that's not something that's going to paralyze me? My particular philosophy is that death gives life meaning. The fact that we have a demarcation point where we will no longer be able to affect what we want and what we can gain from this planet, from our lifetime, The fact that there's a constrained period of time gives us an enormous amount of meaning whereby we can make use of every day and suck the marrow out of life. That philosophy of death providing life meaning, I think, is something that can help a lot of people understand what it is that we're actually afraid of. It's simply the unknown. It's not something that is sinister and that we have to fear. It is simply an event that will happen because we are biological creatures. The second question of what happens to this human being, the spirit that is a part of who I am, what happens to that when we die? Now, there are a lot of different theories because no one knows. It is a transcendent component that defies our ability to explain it through language, through any sort of expression. We simply cannot comprehend what it is that happens to this living being when we die. Now, my atheist friends tell me that the spirit, the component of the human that is not the biological, but is the personality, the element that loves, the element that has passion, that element simply stops existing and is no more. If it is not recorded through some sort of means, an electronic or some type of method of capturing what that human was about, then that ceases once our pulse goes flatline and we are no more. Christian beliefs and Abrahamic beliefs, quite frankly, believe that our souls, which are an inbuilt part of the spirit, are sent to heaven for judgment. And based on our acceptance of Christ in the Christian tradition, or our life and how it was lived in the Jewish and Muslim traditions, we will then reap rewards concurrent based on those facts, how we lived, basically. In the Christian tradition, there's some debate as to whether or not your palace in heaven will be greater or lesser than someone who perhaps only accepted Christ but was a murderer. I don't necessarily have any sway one way or the other on that topic because it assumes human conceptions as part of heaven, and that's not something that I believe we can even understand, quite frankly. The middle ground, the spiritual elements that I personally profess, indicate that our souls, our spirit, is here on this planet Earth for a specific reason. We're here to learn something, and there's an element of our being that isn't necessarily ready to take whatever the next step is in the interdimensional, universal matrix of energies that make up our universe. It's been said previously by Joseph Campbell and others that consciousness, in fact, very well may be energy, and that the two are simply different sides of the same coin. It's something that I believe in. I truly believe that consciousness is energy, and that when my physical being ends here on Earth, that consciousness will return back to the source. And whatever I had the opportunity to learn while I was here, and whatever enlightenment I experienced, will give me knowledge that is transferable to that being, to that spirit. That then assumes that there is the potential for a spirit or a soul to have multiple lives and to make multiple trips to a Earth-type planet for lessons or some sort of education. And I truly believe that that is the case. In my instance, the chronic pain and other disabilities that I have lived with since birth have been a key part of who I am and have taught me lessons I would have never otherwise had the opportunity to learn. It pushed me to a bottom that required me to ask very hard questions of myself and be willing to suffer an ego death. In other words, dying completely to the person that I was and reformulating a new person based on lessons and understandings that I had gained because of that bottoming out and the mistakes that I had made previously. I firmly believe that I chose this life, almost as if there was a travel agent in the universal consciousness that said, what would you like to do? How would you like to? Would you like to go be the son of a billionaire? And I said, no, I'd like to go live with some middle class folks who will take pretty good care of me and will love me intensely, but they're not going to know what to do with this kid who's got disabilities and is a freak and really isn't, quote unquote, typical. And that's going to give me a lot of things that I would not have otherwise been able to achieve. And the travel agent nodded and said, great, when do you want to go? And because time doesn't exist in the eternal, we set a demarc and boop, I was here. And this whole journey throughout the 46 years of my life, and whatever is going to come, is part of that journey to learn and understand and enlighten my soul, my spirit, with the knowledge required and the experience required, the transcendent elements that I could not write down if I tried, to give my being what it needs to then take the next step from, say, a seventh dimension in the universal realms to something perhaps at a higher level, or to become a teacher or a leader that offers other beings the information and the guidance they need in order to advance their souls and to become more than they are. At the end of the day, that is my belief about what life is to be a better version of what you were day after day after day. And to judge yourself based on that criteria, not on some conception of what a celebrity or a political leader or a super rich person might have. That's not what I am, and it's not who I am. My name's Chris Rogers. These are my thoughts on death and what happens after death, and they're there for your consideration.